Hey, I'm Kevin, and this is HFX by Bike, a channel all about getting around Halifax by bike. Except, sometimes I play accountant. In June of 2025, the Mayor of Halifax submitted a motion to pause all planning and construction work on the city's bike network, citing impacts on traffic and escalating costs of the program. The motion was defeated in council largely on the grounds that 1. The bike network is broadly popular among urban residents, and 2. The time to make changes to the budget is during budget season, which was in January. Beyond the politics, I think it's important to address the substance of the underlying arguments. I already made a video about the impacts of the bike lanes on traffic as it was all happening, and in my view, no one has offered either good data or good arguments that building bike lanes is driving Halifax traffic woes. Pun totally intended. Costs are another matter. When originally envisioned circa 2017, Halifax's core bike network had a price tag of approximately $25 million, with about 85% of the costs being covered by federal matching funds and target completion of 2022. It's 2025, and we're about 60% of the way through if you include the interim builds. We spent about $15.8 million, primarily in federal funds, and have, according to a recent staff report, about $77 million left to go in new builds. You may have worked out that this means that the total cost of the bike network is now estimated to be $92.8 million from start to finish, which, according to several math experts I consulted for this video, is somewhat more than the original $25 million estimate. If you want the city to have more bike infrastructure, then this kind of cost escalation is a major problem. On the political side of things, it provides a straightforward pressure point for people who oppose bike infrastructure to apply to the debate. The more something costs, the easier it is to push back against. On the economic side, the more each project costs, the fewer projects we get, given the available funding is limited. So when a project almost quadruples in cost, bike infrastructure advocates either have to go back and ask for more funding, which isn't guaranteed, or accept that some other future project down the line won't be happening. As someone who wants Halifax to have more bike infrastructure, this leads me to the main question of today's video: why have Halifax's bike lane projects gotten so expensive? If, like me, you're entering this debate operating at a Lucille Bluth level of understanding of how much bike infrastructure costs, so let's fill our collective ignorance with some data and context. While there are relatively few bike projects in the city to help populate our baseline expectations, the city does dozens of analogous projects each year in the form of street repaving and sidewalk renewals. This happens with little or no public interest in the costs, so we can use these as a useful tool for setting expectations about the cost of bike infrastructure. To establish a baseline, I went through the city's capital budgets between 2018 and present. Each street and sidewalk project is listed as a line item indicating the estimated cost and scope of work. I measured the distance in meters between the indicated start and end points for each project over the years, which allowed me to calculate the cost in meters for each project type over time. Here's the data plotted out, with sidewalk renewals shown in blue and road resurfacing shown in red. The lines are the average per meter cost within each budget year, and the dots show the individual projects. After 2022, the capital budget stopped showing project level costs, so I can only show overall annual costs. Both project types have an average annual cost per meter increase of 12%. I've added linear cost projections of this amount from the last year of observable data as dashed lines out to 2028, the endpoint we're discussing regarding bike network buildout. From 2018 to 2028, the cost per meter of renewing a sidewalk can be expected to increase roughly threefold, and a slightly higher cost escalation pattern can be seen for road resurfacing work. It's also important to note that there's considerable variation between projects of the same type within each year, with the cost per meter of the most expensive project being 8 to 10 times that of the cheapest. Just from looking through the project sites in Street View, this is broadly correlated with the size of the project. For instance, a road with a greater width curb to curb seems to be more expensive. Likewise, sidewalks on steep hills seem to be more expensive than those on flat terrain. This is just from informal observation. The point is that within a broad category of sidewalk and road paving projects, there's considerable variability in the cost to cover the same distance. Now that we have a bit of context, we can start going through the city's bike network projects and seeing how much they cost and how those costs have changed over time. First, some definitions. The goal of the analysis is to be able to point at a piece of completed bike infrastructure in the city, its associated cost, and then make a reasonable judgment about what the city got for its money. This means I'm limited to completed projects in the regional center AAA network, where I can source the cost of the bike infrastructure piece on its own. Projects are often bundled together once sent out for a contract, meaning that the headline cost of the project is several times higher than the bike infrastructure component on its own. My primary source for bike project costs comes from the same as the road paving and sidewalk replacements, the city's archived capital budgets. Unfortunately, this faces the same problem as the other project types, namely, line level cost estimates stop being available for budgets for the year 2023 forward. Alas, that's all the data we have. In 2018, the first projects in the urban bike network started to roll out the door. This included the roadside multi-use paths on Mount Hope Avenue in Dartmouth and Ahern next to the Halifax Commons. Each of these projects has a cost per meter built that's pretty consistent with general roadwork and sidewalk improvements, so I don't think there's anything objectionable here. In 2019, we got the extension of the Barrington Greenway multi-use path from the base of the McDonald Bridge to Devonshire and the North End, the build-out of the South Park Street protected bike lanes between Inglis and Spring Garden Road, and the Vernon Bikeway running between west and south ends of the peninsula. The cost per meter of these projects were all roughly the same as the 2018 multi-use paths, and road and sidewalk project costs in the same year more generally. In 2020, we started to get our first highly variable cost generated by differing designs. At the low end, there's the temporary build-out of the Lower Watt Street protected bike lanes, which mostly consist of flex posts. This is an order of magnitude cheaper to build than anything that had come so far, although anyone who's used them is probably angrily typing that it shows in the comments as I speak. In the middle, there's the Hollis Street protected bike lane downtown and the build-out of the Penhorn multi-use path in Dartmouth. These are slightly more expensive than similar designs a couple years prior, but the cost escalation is in line with road and sidewalk work, so they don't really stand out to me. The project that does stand out to me are the South Park Street protected bike lanes between Spring Garden and Sackville. These lanes are over 5 times more expensive than any other bike infrastructure project completed up to that point on a per meter basis, and to date are the most expensive project per meter by a wide margin as far as I can tell. I did some digging through the budget to see if I could narrow down where that money went. At the same time as the bike lane installation, the road was resurfaced and the sidewalk was refurbished on the western side of the road. All of those costs are accounted for separately and are broadly in line with the average costs of projects of that size, which means that the only place for their money to have gone was the bike lanes and the adjacent streetscaping, like the nearby benches, bios walls, and brickwork. I don't have a way of independently confirming it, but it looks like the bike lane construction funded the adjacent neighborhood beautification upgrades. In 2021, we got some of the first work on the North End Bikeway, namely the section between Leeds and Duffus. It's a pretty straightforward design, so it was relatively cheap. Work on the North End Bikeway as a whole is still ongoing, but I don't have the individual budget line items, so they're not available for analysis. We also had the Allen Oak Bikeway built out to its current extent, which has a similar cost profile to the North End Bikeway. The Delhi Bikeway in Dartmouth stands out as being somewhat more expensive than the other 2 bikeways that moved forward that year. This comes down to it including a multi-use path that extended through Sullivan's Pond Park. The big spend for 2021 was the Weiss Road protected bike lanes. For this project, no neighborhood beautification, the money seems to have gone towards technical complexity and intersection treatments that allow high volumes of cars, bikes, transit priority, and pedestrians to occupy the same space. This takes the form of bike signals at every intersection west of Boland and a detection loop at Thistle to let bikes get onto the commons. Weiss is probably the bike infrastructure project where the city spent more than is typical, but you can see where that money went. The only project in the analysis for 2022 is what I've started to call the West End non-bikeway, essentially extending the Bears Road multi-use path along some local streets and connecting up to Joe Howe Drive and the Chain of Lakes Trail. This is another above average cost project with the bulk of the price tag coming from the short multi-use path extension between Ralston and Pennington near the rail cut and the ramp connecting Elliott Street to Exit 0. 2023 is the last year where I have data and saw a slew of new projects completed. The cheapest was the interim build-out of the Slater Bikeway in Dartmouth, which mostly involved low-cost traffic calming on the street. Next, we have the temporary seasonal upgrades on Bell Road in the form of flex posts. This was also pretty low cost. The big surprise for me for the year was the Devonshire protected bike lanes in North End Halifax. These are the cheapest barrier protected bike lanes the city has ever built on a per meter basis, and I have no explanation for why the city got such a good deal on this project. People who are familiar with them are probably furiously typing that some sections aren't actually protected, but even if you scale the distance and recalculate the cost per meter, it's still in the same ballpark. It just doesn't matter. The last items on my timeline are a pair of extension projects off the previously mentioned Hollis Street bike lanes. The first extended the Hollis bike lanes towards Barrington, and the second extended them down towards Terminal Road to connect up to the Lower Water Street bike lanes. These lanes were notably quite expensive, matching or even exceeding the cost of the Weiss Road lanes on a per meter basis, but without any of the technical amenities. These 2 projects are basically the same design as the Devonshire lanes from before, but came in at a per meter cost roughly 10 times greater. My best explanation is that both of these projects are extremely small, totaling just 350 meters between the 2 of them. One thing I noticed when doing data collection on the street resurfacing and sidewalk replacement projects is that smaller projects were somewhat reliably more expensive than larger scale projects. We don't have enough data points to show the trend in the bike network, but it's possible the same dynamic is at play for these 2 projects. With so few projects in the original bike network plan both completed and directly linkable to line item costs, this analysis is inherently limited in what it can tell us. Still, I came away with a few impressions about the costs of building bike infrastructure in Halifax. The first is that installing bike infrastructure has a similar base cost and project-to-project variability as something like renewing a sidewalk on one side of the street over the same distance. The second is that this is somewhat of a mixed blessing. Both sidewalk renewals and street paving projects have an aggressive cost escalation trajectory during the window in which I have data. Just sharing this trend would go a long way in explaining the forecasted cost increase for the bike network. It turns out that it pays to be prompt in building things. Lastly, we do probably have pretty good control over the costs of building out the bike network based on how we design and implement projects. When a project cost more, it was mostly because it did more things, rather than because the cost is essentially random. Some of those costs have large value add in terms of user experience, while others exist more or less to avoid introducing imperceptibly small inconveniences to drivers or just preserve on-street parking spaces. The variability in the costs to date show that it's very possible to build bike infrastructure in Halifax that's broadly low cost, but that it's also possible for costs to spiral when projects face excessive delays or when the bike network becomes responsible for goals other than moving cyclists around safely and efficiently. Thanks for watching through to the end of the video. Let me know in the comments if you found any of this information useful or if you feel like I've missed something. Be sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos all about getting around Halifax by bike. That's it for this one. As always, thanks for watching and see you next time.